All right. Hello, world, and thank you all so much for joining. My name is Cole Stark, and I'm the head of growth at Pieces for Developers. And we're really excited to have you on today. So, today we'll be talking about the latest features that we've just released this morning for Pieces Copilot, as well as how those features can augment your existing workflow as they are now integrated into our suite of plugins. So, we'll be getting into some technical details, some demos, and some other interesting information. But at the end, we'll be answering questions. So feel free to spam the chat with anything you have in mind, and we'll try to get to it. So that being said, let's jump into some intros. Caleb, why don't you tell us who you are, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, guys, as Cole mentioned, my name's Caleb. I'm one of the plugin developers at Pieces. I've worked on the Obsidian plugin, the Jupyter Lab plugin, as well as the Copilot experience within VS Code. Today, my job is I'll be doing some demos for you guys, which is really exciting. I'll finally be able to show a lot of the work that's been going on behind the scenes for probably the last couple months now. And yeah.
Nice. Mark, tell us about yourself.
Hey everyone, excited to be here. My name's Mark and I'm the CTO here at Pieces, and I do a lot of different things, but I mainly manage the infrastructure around Pieces OS. So that's anything data, API, cloud related, as well as I have the pleasure of working with the machine learning team, as well as a lot of the plugin and integration developers.
Amazing. And Brian, tell us who you are.
Nice. Yeah, hey everyone. Brian, I'm a machine learning engineer here at Pieces, and I work mostly on deep learning, machine learning systems at Pieces. So as opposed to actually training models, I am taking the amazing models that our machine learning team trains and figuring out how to optimize those and serve those on your computer, get them running fast.
Last but not least, Savo, why don't you tell us who you are and maybe give a little bit of a background of what Pieces is?
Sure. Hey everyone, you've probably seen me around, but I'm Savo, the CEO and technical co-founder at Pieces. Thanks for joining us today and happy Friday. I'll give a quick high level of Pieces and kind of what we're trying to achieve. But at the end of the day, our entire company is to build an experience that improves developer productivity during the work in progress journey, right? And so, as you're researching and problem solving in the browser, as you're writing, refactoring, and building amazing things in the IDE, and as you're collaborating with your teammates, Pieces needs to sit across all three of those workflow pillars to just aggregate important materials and that workflow context so that it's available for you to have as you go about your work, but also to share with others. And the beautiful thing about aggregating these things is that you can inform really A+ generative processes. So we'll do a lot of demos today, but that's a high level of what we're up to. Developer productivity, making it A+.
Thank you for that. All right, so let's dig into some of the new Copilot features that we've released and maybe how that sets us apart from other AI technologies in the software development space. Well, Savo, first, I'd like to hear from you, what Pieces Copilot is. And just broadly, I know we'll go into some more details here in a second, but, on our last AMA, we talked about how Pieces Copilot can augment the workflows of both individual and enterprise developers. So, here we'll be talking more in depth about some of our brand new features, but why don't you give us a rundown of what Pieces Copilot is and how some of these new features can help augment your workflow across some of the developers' tools?
Yeah, so our Copilot efforts have really been about proactivity and access of the things you have saved, right? And so a lot of developers are starting to include generative AI throughout their workflows, right? So that's problem solving, debugging, generating code, and just moving faster. And we are interested in building a Copilot that not only helps you write code, but also interact with your workflow at large. So today, we've made it really amazing to save things to Pieces, and you can search for those things and whatnot. But one of the ways that we look at our Copilot is how do you interact with these materials? Obviously to generate code, but beyond that, how do you interact with who these materials are related to? So your Copilot understanding your team and what people work on and how that team operates. And then the other coordinated point is when you are working on things. So you've probably seen the workflow activity inside of the Pieces app, but picking up where you left off and kind of getting back into flow is a really, really nice task that we're making the Copilot available at. What was I doing yesterday? Where did I leave off? What are important things to solve today? So a Copilot not only understanding the code you're trying to write, but also what you're trying to build and the people you need to interact with, what you were doing, in this research cycle and how that informs the decisions that were made. Capturing that context, accessing it, and enabling the Copilot to serve that back to you in a natural conversational format is the name of the game for us.
Right. And in the past, GPT 3.5, I believe, has been powering our Copilot. But as of today, we are now featuring local LLMs in our Copilot. So this is a really exciting launch for us. Brian, maybe you could walk us through what LLLMs are and what's the technology behind it.
Yeah, absolutely. So just very, very brief background on those who aren't familiar with LLMs generally. The LM, language model part of that, is simply just a machine learning model that outputs a sequence of words given some input sequence. So think ChatGPT, and that's the most kind of ubiquitous case that everyone thinks of here with the first LLMs. And so a large language model scaled up is just one that's been trained on much more data, has many more parameters. It's capable of knowing much more information and giving that back to the user. And so there's been an important trend recently in machine learning in that around open source. And so how do we take these large kind of big black box models and let us as kind of machine learning developers start to iterate on them? And so companies like Meta releasing or LMSys, and so Meta releases Llama 2, completely open source. They had a research paper, the data, the model weights, the whole thing. This was pretty groundbreaking, as opposed to OpenAI kind of keeping it locked up, and they have their own reasons for that. But Meta releasing these has allowed us to take that and put it on a user's hardware, which is pretty incredible. So now we can customize that model fully as we see fit, and a big part of that is attaching your personalized data to it in a process called retrieval augmented generation, which I'm sure Sava would talk a lot about here and our other integration teams. But having access to an open source non-black box model allows us to attach these smaller modules to it that customize it, personalize it based on your data. And so it's this open source trend has been pretty incredible for us, and opens the door for developers to personalize the models for their use cases and on the strength of their hardware, and it opens a lot of doors for us.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that, model privacy and security while maintaining a high fidelity output has been a challenge, right? And you've seen a lot of market education, consumer education going on via Microsoft and Google, and the goal there is to educate enterprises and reinforce the security aspect, right, and the privacy aspect. And you've got all the drama around the GitHub Copilot and the lawsuits and all that stuff. But for us, we're doing a lot of enterprise pilots, and the best way to kind of convince them, hey, look, this thing is secure, it is private, and we're going to respect that, is to just turn off your Wi-Fi and have all the capabilities that you know and love about Pieces right there on device. I'll say as well, we have been working for quite some time to build our own Edge ML that does all the enrichment and the tagging and the embeddings and all the like. But, I think that we are looking at how enterprises are going to expect the ability to bring their own large language models. And so we've not only focused on, making models edge capable, but also to making them modular and extensive on top of our platform. So we'll talk about that a bit more, but pretty interesting stuff going local.
Yeah. And Mark, maybe you could touch on, how we built on top of all this technology with the desktop application. Maybe, touch on the difference between Pieces for Developers, the desktop application, as well as Pieces OS, the thing that powers the desktop application and our plugins.
Absolutely. Yeah. So for those who aren't familiar, Pieces OS is it's a centralized application that's just running locally on your computer that enables any one of the Pieces plugins to connect to Pieces OS. That way it has one centralized backend that kind of all of the plugins get to talk to. That way all the data is shared, it's not replicated, and all that sort of fun stuff. So with that, what we can do is we started the downloading phase for some of these LLMs, and you can't ship them directly with your Pieces OS build. I mean, you can, but then you're going to have problems with it's going to take a long time to update to the next version. So what we do is we download a lot of that stuff at runtime. So that's really great. We utilize different isolates and so on to ensure that it's a smooth download process and all of your different pieces actions can continue to function properly. So after that download process at runtime, what we can do is we can actually start to load and use that model itself. And again, just like the download process, we want to ensure it's still a smooth process and you're still able to save, share, and reuse. So what we do is when we're loading and we're actually using the model, it's actually running in an isolate to make sure that the main thread of your actual Pieces OS application continues to run smooth. So with that, what we can do is we set up a WebSocket connection from Pieces for Developers to Pieces OS. And then with that, what we can do is we can make a request to the isolate to go ahead and load, or if it's already loaded into memory, just go ahead and use it immediately. And then from the isolate, what we're able to do is communicate with send ports and so on via Dart, and then communicate some of those changes via stream controllers. So it starts to get a little complex, but in a nutshell, all we're doing is we're just making sure that Pieces OS runs smooth and making sure that we're delivering those individual changes to any of the open WebSocket connections to Pieces OS. And then the final piece here is, hey, if that model is loaded in the isolate, what can happen is your Pieces OS will be, either one, using CPU, or number two, it's using up RAM associated with your GPU. So what we can also do is we will proactively unload that if you haven't used it in a little bit, or number two, you can go ahead and you can unload that once you're done using it to free up some of that memory.
And we got all types of demos to kind of show and tell some of the stuff Mark just was foreshadowing.
Right. Well, besides local LLMs, we also have introduced some other really exciting features. Caleb, maybe you could tell us about some of the right-click features that we've added within VS Code.
Yeah, so we've kind of introduced a new set of features within VS Code and a couple other plugins, which we kind of have labeled Ask Pieces Copilot about. And essentially, what these features allow you to do is you can in VS Code, you can either right-click on a file in your file explorer, or you could select some code, right-click on it, and basically click the Ask Pieces Copilot About button. And what that is going to do is it's going to initialize a Copilot chat with that context that you just selected with your mouse, essentially. And really what this can do is it can make a very streamlined process of question answering about the content that's within your workspace as you're working. And it's all within VS Code. You don't need to go out and copy and paste code into ChatGPT and open up your web browser and do all this stuff in order to basically utilize these models. Pretty much with these features, it's very streamlined. You can stay in flow, and they're just super easy to use, really.
Yeah, and I know we'll jump into some demos. I know everyone's probably itching for that, but I'll just mention we've made a large effort to make sure that the models are powering copilots in all of our integrations. So Jupyter Hub, JetBrains, Obsidian, VS Code, etc. I know the Obsidian community is quite excited for some of this stuff. And to highlight some of the technical nuance there, this concept of continuous regrounding, right? So you have one model on your device that's running, but as you switch between your desktop app, your Chrome extension, and VS Code, you need to, in a very efficient way, kind of package up that context, send it to Pieces OS, and reground that model before the question is asked. And so it's a pretty smooth experience. And yeah, you'll see it in the demos. But Cole, where do we want to take it?
Well, unless there's anything else you want to touch on in terms of retrieval augmented generation, and how applying more plugins to your workflow that are integrated with Pieces can, help fuel this regrounding of the AI. Then we can jump into some demos.
Okay. Well, let's jump in demos, and you know me, I can talk and show at the same time pretty well.
Yeah, go for it.
But I'll go ahead and pull up my entire desktop app here. So real quick, as just a refresher, you can see this is my Pieces drive. It's got all different types of things saved to Pieces, and everyone has known and come to love a lot of the enrichment that we do with machine learning. So when I paste something and save it to Pieces, we're going to go ahead and tag that thing, classify it, enrich it with all the links and searches and all types of good stuff. And so when we think about context, a good informant of the context that you have is the things you've saved. We'll talk about shadow saving here at the end of the chat, but basically the copilots are available obviously on a per material basis. So you can go ahead and open that up and you can jump right into that discussion. It'll prompt you with some questions that are relevant to this context. But most importantly, we've really focused on the context at large being powered via your workflow activity, the things you have saved, and as well context that you might set on demand. So I'll jump into a demo here and I'll show you what the global Copilot is capable of, and how we're able to take, large language models that are a bit smaller in parameter size, but make them really, really A+ in their responses. So if you install Pieces OS, you'll note that you have this little indicator down here, and this is where you get to choose what runtime you're using. For me, I'm on a MacBook Air, and I have 24 gigs of RAM, and it's an M2 chip. And so, I'm going to go ahead and say 7 billion parameter model with GPU. If you're unsure, feel free to reach out to us. But as well, if you want to be online, you want to have higher context windows, or if you want to use, larger, more advanced models up in the cloud, you have your OpenAI options, and Palm 2 options are coming early next week, which is really great. But back to the local stuff. So I've already downloaded both the CPU and GPU models. So I'm just going to go ahead and you can come in here, select which one you want to use, and it'll be set down in the bottom corner. So if I'm over on the cloud, I set GPT-4, you'll see it reflected down there. But for this demo, we'll do local 7 billion llama GPU accelerated. So after I've chosen my runtime model, one of the ways to make this a bit better is the context. So I am in my workflow here. I want to go ahead and say, I was referencing this tutorial. I'm going to copy that tutorial link and I'll paste that into Pieces. So we'll save that. And that's going to go out and get all the context from that website. And then as well, I want it to reference some of the things that I've saved from earlier in my work. So maybe, some stuff about WebSockets, maybe some stuff with, client connections. I'll go ahead and save those too. And then lastly, you can also add a folder. So I have a directory where I was doing some gRPC stuff and talking to the local models. I'll choose that folder, and that's going to be set as well. So now that I've got my context set, I can go ahead and ask a question. So I'll start out, treat your model friendly. Hey, how are you? And this will kind of give you a little example of the speed test. So we're doing a small cold start once that model is initially loaded into memory. And we'll see. There we go. Okay, so it looks like it's booted up. And that's because, again, as Mark mentioned, we unload that model to respect the RAM usage on your device. But now I'm just going to go ahead and say, I need to get started with some Dart stuff. To get started with some WebSockets. And you can see it's going off because I already set that tutorial as context. So it's talking about chat room sessions and server.dart and everything like that. But I'll say, WebSockets for this Dart project. And I can never type on live demos. We will go ahead and let this finish up here, but you can see it's got some pretty high fidelity outputs, and it's actually coming in quite fast. Okay, it's telling me basically how to be an expert programmer. I appreciate that. Yep, definitely helps. Thank you. Now we'll get to some code generation. So I need to get started with some WebSockets for this Dart project. And let's go ahead and see. It's also proactively figuring out some follow-up questions that I might want to ask. But we've got this in process. I'm using the GPU. Okay, great. So yeah, it'll say, hey, here's some dependencies. And fun fact, Dart is not a very common language. So even for models that, maybe haven't trained on a large corpus of Dart examples, that context that we're providing there is going to really, really make it nice when it comes to the syntax and the fidelity of that output. So it said, hey, pull down this package, go ahead and take a look at your main function here, connect to localhost 1000. It's ironic because all of my connections that I've demoed with are localhost 1000. So it's anticipating what I'm actually going to connect to. It's got some stuff about, basically securing your WebSocket and then sending a message. So I can say, how can I support multi-channel WebSocket connections? Go ahead and do that. Looks like the related question actually got, or the related follow-ups got tucked down here, but we promise it won't continue to stack those up. That's just a little bug on the UI. So yeah, let's see what we got here. So coming in with the connect, multiple WebSocket servers simultaneously. And this code generation is actually pretty solid. Tracking each channel, connect to them. The first one, nice. Second one, great. We'll let this finish up, and I'll show you what we can do. After this is done here. This is just demoing the capabilities of, hey, I'm running on a MacBook Air, a 7 billion parameter model with a ton of context.
Okay, I think an important thing to note here is that this is the 7 billion parameter Llama 2 model here. This is as small as you can go to get a model locally on your machine. It's pretty incredible how quality the output is, especially kind of augmented with RAG, as opposed to GPT-4. I think it's a bit unknown how large it is, but it's been guessed it's closer to 300-400 billion parameters, and so this is 2%. The size of that, it's or less than that. It's pretty incredible we can get such a good output with such a small model.
Yeah, and I mean, it even just said, hey, wait on all the connections here. Go ahead, iterate over them, and listen for incoming messages. And you can see I can go back and forth all day long. I know Caleb's going to demo some of the stuff inside of VS Code. That Copilot is going to be regrounded and available there. But yeah, I'll just note, from this generative process, if you want to make the next cycle of generation better and you're working on some of this stuff, go ahead and save something to Pieces. And now that's available for future context. But also, if you just want to explore things you have saved, you can say, hey, find similar snippets right here. This is my kind of offline Google Drive for all this stuff. Or Google search, I guess, and Drive, but it'll show you related people. It'll show you other relevant, kind of snippets that you have. It'll show you related links out to the documentation that might be associated, all types of good stuff. And you're like, hey, nothing here. I'm going to go ahead and just resume that Copilot chat and keep going. So all types of really, really interesting stuff that's going on with the Copilots. And we'll talk more, but I won't get ahead of myself.
Cool. And that workflow activity view that you were showing there, how does that relate to the Copilot?
Yeah, okay. I'll share again. Here we go. Thank you for the questions. Keep them coming. But basically, workflow activity is a pretty nice one because it helps you understand what you're working on, what you're copying and pasting, and just the way you're interacting with your Pieces drive. So you can see, if I'm updating things or if I'm referencing things, what am I searching? And it really just kind of captures that like super subtle, usage of the material. And so from there, we can actually not only embed all of your workflow activity so that the Copilot can understand what you were doing yesterday or where you left off, but we can also understand what is most important from a perspective of retrieval augmented generation. And so using, the searches and the references and the shares as proxies for relevance to your current workflow activity is a nice thing. Just making sure automatic retrieval augmented generation is better. And so, yeah, pretty soon, in I think like 2 or 3 weeks, you can say, hey, what was I doing yesterday? And it'll pick up exactly where you left off. I'll add one last thing, and this is coming out, towards the middle of Q4, but it's this context of, or this concept of proactively saving things. So we've talked a lot about how I can copy and paste things. I'll show you an example real quick into Pieces. So, we wanted to make that a lot better, but people don't often think to, go ahead and copy and paste. So, for my notes today, this is what you do. You paste it in, it's going to do all that enrichment. It's going to tag it, add all that context, etc. But in the future, things will be automatically saved in an invisible layer that we call ghost assets. And those ghost assets will be materials, people, links, and so on that were either generated in a conversation, not actively saved yourself, but are there. And so as you're going from the browser to the IDE to the collaborative space, we're pattern recognizing important materials. And we have a pool of roughly 200, 300 ghost assets that are always decayed and re-ranked to provide automatic retrieval augmented generation. So pretty crazy stuff going on with workflow activity and proactive saving. Yep.
Nice. Well, Caleb, half of this AMA is talking about our integrations and how the Copilot is now in some of these other tools that developers know and love. So maybe you could take us into VS Code and show us around a little bit.
Absolutely. I'll go ahead and start presenting.
And also, Cole, as well, I can answer some questions here. So Scott came in, he was talking about the Falcon models. Yes, Scott, we are absolutely taking a look at some of those. I know that Brian and the machine learning team has looked at, the really big ones like the Falcon 160 or 180 billion parameters. That one's getting a lot of attention. There's also some multilingual models that are coming out. I know we'll touch on that in the back half. And Kevin, to follow up on your question, where do we store these large language models? I think that, loading them from a drive or, selecting, a side loaded model, that could be very possible. So.
Great. Yeah. Is everything all good with my screen? I believe so.
Yeah, we're looking good.
Cool. So as Cole mentioned, I'm going to be demoing some of the Copilot features within VS Code. So for context, basically, I have VS Code open. As you can see, this is like somewhat of a large workspace, but in reality, really what it is it's a mono repo of multiple example extensions for JupyterLab, which is one of our integrations. And basically, the JupyterLab team, they maintain this repository as basically a very large, pretty thorough and useful set of examples on how you can do certain things when it comes to creating extensions in JupyterLab. And one thing in particular that I would really like to show off has to do with this little toolbar button here. The Pieces JupyterLab extension has a toolbar button itself. And I do remember back when I was implementing this, I had a really hard time in the research process on, how I can exactly do this. And, certain tools like ChatGPT weren't exactly working for me. And later on, after I implemented it, I actually realized that this would be a really great use case of RAG. And so, I would kind of like to demo that. So I'm going to go ahead and right click on this toolbar button folder that I have here, and I'm going to immediately click Ask Pieces Copilot. And I'm going to ask a question about the code that is contained within this directory. So I would like to ask, how can I add a cell toolbar button to my JupyterLab extension? Great. And as you can see, it already set my context here. You can expand it and view the files if you would like to. And it's kind of just going step by step. Looks like it wasn't quite able to get the answer I was looking for, but maybe if I tried it again, it'd be okay. I'll go ahead and continue though. It did give me a list of relevant files If I click on this schema plugin file, this is actually the answer that I was looking for. So it was able to find a relevant snippet, which led me directly to what I need, which is this little plugin JSON file where you're able to just write a little bit of JSON to add a cell toolbar button. As you can see, there's some buttons in here in these code blocks. You can copy the code and paste it somewhere. You can save it to your Pieces library, and you can even generate a shareable link just in case you wanted to share that with one of your colleagues.
And Caleb, I'll just add, now that you found that bit of config code there that you were looking for, that's something that, either we proactively save for you, or you could select and right click to save that to Pieces. That would inform the next kind of cycle when you're in this project.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you, Savo. And yeah, so some more features that Savo just recently was going over inside of PFD. You can choose your Copilot runtime in VS Code. I'm just going to glance over that because we've already shown it. And another cool thing that kind of relates to one of the things that you showed off is your context selector. Oh, I actually have to clear the chat first. But yeah, if you go into your context selector, you're going to see your entire directory structure within your workspace. Everything's nicely sorted and set up just like your file tree would be. And yeah, you can just go through and click any one of these checkboxes and basically set your context for that Copilot.
Yeah, and one thing maybe, Brian, you should touch on is the work we do to extract the right context. Given a very large grouping of files or something, the difficult component there is what's important, right? And how do you take that out, extract it, pack it into the context window for that model? So Brian, I don't know if you want to expand on that, but that's actually a pretty big challenge that we have overcome.
Sure. Yeah, I don't think we can give away all the specifics on how we exactly do this, but essentially we look at everything. If let's say you give a directory to us, we look at all the code in there, and then we have called a snippetizer algorithm, and we're essentially ranking what are the best or most snippet-like snippets given there. So we do a bit of machine learning and a bit of just heuristics processing on this. So we're doing bracket matching and all sorts of kind of tree parsing of that. So it's a bit of ML and a bit of tree parsing, and we come out with what we believe or the machine believes is the best snippets that are going to be the most useful for you.
Yep. And I'll add, as I mentioned, we have a lot of kind of really small models that run on device, and they create embeddings that we rely on for a lot of the other activities, how we rank your search results, how we associate similarities between people, events, snippets, workflow context, etc. The benefit of those models kind of running is that we can actually use those models to chain the outputs of them, and we can do this very, very quick, right? So 20 milliseconds, 50 milliseconds, whatever it is. And we could do that at scale before we even feed it into the large language model. So small models running very fast, and then large language models interpreting some of that stuff.
Absolutely. Thank you, Savo. And yeah, I also wanted to dive into one last use case, the VS Code Copilot. And I kind of was just going to ask it a question that isn't super relevant to the current workspace that I have open. And in that case, I'm going to go ahead and make sure that I don't have any context, because the context in this case wouldn't actually be that helpful, because I'm going to ask it to do something that's outside of the realm of an example Jupyter Lab extension. And yeah, this is actually something I was just doing the other day, where I was doing some WebSocket programming, and I wanted to find a way to basically await a WebSocket connection in JavaScript. So I'm going to go ahead and ask that same exact question. How do I await WebSocket connection in JavaScript? And yeah, it's gonna go down. It's gonna say using the Promise API, using async await, and as you can see, it did a really great job here of generating some JavaScript code, which is the exact kind of code that I'm going to end up needing And it creates this nice little helper function using that promise API that I'm sure every JavaScript developer absolutely loves. Looks like I got a little bit of a hang there. I don't know if that was due to something on the OpenAI servers part of thing, because, I don't know. I'm actually not too sure.
You could try it again locally if you wanted to.
Yeah, sure. We'll do it.
That'll be the real test for Mark on his side. Yeah.
So I'm going to select the 7 billion parameter GPU model by Llama 2. And I'm going to say, how do I await a WebSocket connection in JavaScript?
There's no network hangs when you're doing that.
That's right.
There will be a bit of a cold start here as well. We are loading 4 gigs of model file into memory, so bear with us. But as soon as that's loaded up, it will stay active for a good bit of time.
Here, if I had to guess, what's going on here is the WebSocket is actually going to be waiting for the first request to finish. And in the case that we get a server hang from OpenAI, which is what I'm pretty sure what just happened, you're actually not going to be able to input another.
Yeah, that's why I said it would be the real test. But hey, that's why we're learning about WebSockets, working with the Copilot, making them better, right? So
yeah,
that's probably a follow-up question.
Yeah, we'll be working on this, I'm sure. Yeah, that's the end of my VS Code demo. Sadly, there was a couple bugs, but I'm sure that like the general premise of the As Copilot About features, RAG, context selection, and really just having this extremely useful tool right inside of your IDE. I think the general concept of that did land. So, yeah.
A big fan of the relevant files there. Basically, hey, if it doesn't exactly answer your question, it's still going to point you in the right direction of sample code, documentation, whatever else you have locally. And that's just again, like, it's not only about the answer that you get back, but it's also like, hey, look here, look at these docs, talk to these people. Right. There's so much more that when the Copilot can't get you where you need to be, it'll at least point you in the right direction. So, yeah, good stuff.
Yeah, big +1 to that. I actually found myself in a very similar case a couple days ago where I was looking at our desktop application, and I really wanted to know how we were doing our saving. And unfortunately, the Command-Shift-F wasn't there for me where I was looking for a specific piece of code in there. So what I did instead is I just right-clicked, asked Copilot About, and then it gave me exactly what I was looking for. That way I didn't have to waste my time trying to sift through all the code, have to understand the entire flow, and it just explained everything to me, making my job a whole lot easier.
Yeah, it's pretty nice. And I'll say, it's funny because our job as engineers and developers is like to have to remember something and look up the rest. I always say that, they taught us that in school. And so Pieces is that kind of brain, if you will, thinking to save things yourself. I think, I also say that developers don't realize they should have saved something until they realized they didn't save it, which at that point you're like, oh man, now I got to go find it. That takes a lot of time, takes you out of context, stuff like that. So I think between us doing the proactive saving and the workflow shadowing, as well as having a Copilot that can kind of navigate all the things in Pieces, elevate those things to your workflow right at that moment in time is going to be a world-class experience. So yeah, if you take this thing, pull it down, turn it on, let it run for a couple days, save some things to it, you're going to get answers from our Copilot, whether it's powered by ChatGPT, Llama 2, whatever, that you're not going to get anywhere else because of that context. So, yeah.
All right. So, we've been getting a lot of love from the Obsidian community. That's another tool that we integrate with. And, while we're waiting on some more questions to come through, audience, feel free to spam the chat so we can, answer any questions that you may have. Maybe Caleb, you want to hop in and just show us a quick view of Obsidian and how the Copilot helps Obsidian workflows for developers.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'll go ahead and share my screen again. Great. and we'll hop over to Obsidian. And yeah, so this is the Obsidian integration, one of the ones that everybody knows and loves at this point. And yeah, as Cole mentioned, there's a couple features that I would like to demo today. One of them being our auto enrichment feature, and then the other one having more to do with the Copilot. So yeah, jumping into our automatic enrichment feature, I have this little code snippet here. It's basically just like a daily note template, very common use case for Obsidian. And yeah, so we have this little pieces button here, and there's a bunch of quick actions you can do. The one that I would like to show off today is actually this one right here, which is pretty jam-packed full of features. And we're going to go ahead and click on it. Yeah, let's see what happens. There's a little bit saying, it's already enriched. Of course, yes, it was already enriched because, got to practice demos.
Yeah.
So it's going through the enrichment process right now. What's going to happen here is it's going to generate me a title. It's going to generate some tags, and it should also generate some links to other code snippets that are similar to this one within my Obsidian vaults. It might take a second. There's definitely a fair amount of ML processing going on in the background, as we were mentioning, contextualizing all of the code within your vault, as well as just, generating these kinds of titles and tags. Yeah, if anybody had anything else to offer on that, I'm definitely open.
Here's a question from Scott Jones. What does enrichment mean in this context?
Yeah, so enrichment is definitely, as you can see, the task just finished. Looks like it might have taken a little bit longer than usual. That's fine. So enrichment really here is as clear as day. As you can see, we added a title. We have some useful tags which you can use in your Obsidian graph view if you wanted. We generated a description as well. Just sort of annotating each one of your code snippets. And another one of the more interesting features, I would say probably one of the more unique features that we have, is we were actually able to create a markdown link, which is essentially going to link me to another file within my vault that has a code snippet that we were able to detect as somewhat similar, either in semantics or use case, to this daily note template that I have here. So you can even click on this and it'll take me directly to that file. And I'm sure somewhere in here there's going to be a nice code snippet. Yep, it found me a good code snippet, which is very similar, same exact code snippet actually. And yeah, so that's really what the enrichment feature is all about. It's really creating those titles, creating those tags that help you in your searching process or your graphing process, as well as that really interesting feature of the auto linker of finding those similar code snippets within your vault. And that can be really helpful for somebody who might have a ton of notes in their vault, and maybe the code snippets are kind of spread out everywhere. And yeah, you could unlock certain pieces of code that maybe you totally forgot were even there, but are very relevant and very useful to what you're currently working on.
Yeah, and what I'll say is, a lot of people, including certain members of our team, they're Obsidian power users, right? And they take a lot of like long form notes, verbose notes that really are beyond just like the material type. And for us, our whole focus is the material type, where it is at, what's the context of it, etc. And it deeply complements Obsidian's strengths, which are focused on the entire note, right? The entire kind of body of research documentation. And so, the ability to say, hey, I'm in VS Code, right click, find something relevant that's over in Obsidian, nested deeply and in some documentation. That's how you start to get the interplay between what you're doing in pillar number 2, writing, reviewing, and editing code in the IDE, and then pillar number 1, which is researching and problem solving and note taking in browser and platforms like Obsidian. So we really try and complement those major workflow pillars and then let them, inform each other's context, so you get, continuous, insightful experience with Pieces.
Absolutely. Thank you, Savo. And yeah, sort of jumping into the next set of features that we were going to talk about today is the Obsidian Copilot. So, very, very similar to all of our other integrations, very similar to the PFD application. You have your context selector here. You can choose your runtime as you please. Right now, I have the Llama 2 model, 7 billion parameter GPU selected. And yeah, this kind of leads me into another statement that I would really like to make, which is, a lot of Obsidian users are very, very privacy aware, and as a lot of other people who don't even use Obsidian are, they just don't really want to be sharing the contents of their nodes, really with anyone online. It's no secret that OpenAI is using many of those conversations to further fine-tune, further train their models. So yeah, we kind of have taken a crack at solving this problem, where you can actually utilize Llama 2, which is a model that runs on your own machine. You really don't have any risk of somebody utilizing that data from your conversation in order to further fine-tune their models. So if you have private information, or maybe even information that's sensitive to maybe a business that you're operating within, using this kind of air-gapped experience with your Wi-Fi off is really something that's very attractive to this community.
Caleb, I'll add in there. So real quick for Jay, the way we're able to crank out integrations so fast is because of the extensibility of Pieces OS. And it's over localhost 1000. We have some WebSocket ports. It's very standardized. And actually, a majority of our code is generated through an open API spec. So we will be not only cranking out more integrations ourselves, but we are looking in Q4 to open up an SDK support in a variety of languages. We're doing this for enterprise as they integrate within their internal tooling. And so we're going to make this available to the community at some point in Q4 ourselves. But yeah, NeoVim, we've gotten a good amount of requests on that, and we'll be taking a look. I don't have an answer that I can give you today, otherwise the team would kill me. But yeah, we'll 100% take a look at that. So yeah, and Caleb, I was just going to add to your note, the local LLMs basically take the entire Pieces OS suite offline. So now you can use every single experience, the saving, the searching, the generative AI stuff, completely air-gapped. I'll ship a demo to Twitter later with the Wi-Fi completely off. So it'll be good.
Yeah, one of my more favorite phrases these days is ChatGPT, no Wi-Fi. So
yeah, hashtag no Wi-Fi.
Yeah, we definitely have it. You could hop into airplane mode and you'd be totally fine.
Yep.
But yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and just show a use case of the Obsidian plugin. We already went over. I have one of the Llama models selected, and in this context selector, I actually have one of my notes selected, which is kind of just going over how we do integration testing for the Obsidian plugin. So I'm just going to go ahead and do a little bit of question answering. I'll say, how do I do integration testing for my Obsidian plugin? And now the model is getting loaded into memory, and we should be sending over our chat to Pieces OS. And as you can see, this is all running on my own computer. It's using that note that I created, and really just giving me a really nice summary on really what are each of the little details that need to be hit on like a full integration test, really just to make sure the plugin works, which is something that's very important to do, as many developers I'm sure know.
And Caleb, I'll go ahead and answer two more questions that came in the chat. So, Travin, I think here, he made a good point, right? Sometimes I don't want the verbose, answer, right? And so, we will have an ability to kind of create like Copilot profiles, right? And, you've seen that We have some stuff coming up with workspaces as well, where the Copilot's context will be scoped to workspaces. Think about workspaces as like PFD, except with Google Chrome profiles. So you can have your personal workspace, your enterprise workspace, whatever else it is. And so, we are going to enable you to say, hey, it's not very verbose. It is very verbose. But then the other point of that is what you're seeing here is a conversational Copilot, but we are also looking at using Copilots to power search. So you saw some of the search stuff that I had. You can see as well, it's going to say, hey, here are relevant files, here are other suggested search queries or follow-up things. But we are in the process of taking the Copilot and making it available in different form factors, so that sometimes you're like, hey, I want to leverage this for search as opposed to have a whole discussion. So yeah, coming down the pipeline for sure.
Yeah, definitely another really exciting feature that we have coming.
I saw the follow-ups here as well. GPU, CPU, it is available for both. So you can go ahead and switch between whatever you'd like to use.
And I can expand on that just a bit. I'm not sure what platform you're on, Travin, but if you're on Mac, we utilize the Apple Metal shaders. That's how we accelerate on the GPU. And then if you're on Linux or Windows, we utilize the Vulkan SDK, which allows us to access either an NVIDIA or an AMD GPU. So it should work on all consumer GPUs out there. But please note, it has to have the proper VRAM. So this model is fairly large. It takes up somewhere between 5 to 6 gigs of VRAM. So please check before you download and use.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and to expand just a little bit on what Brian and Savo were talking about, just to note, this feature is extremely experimental. So if you do have problems where it's taken a long time, or you may have selected the incorrect model, it's all good. Take a deep breath. First, you can reach out to support, and we'll always be able to help you out. Let us know like your experience in the whole process. But number two, you can always just turn your Pieces OS off in that top right corner in the toolbar there, and then maybe retry a different model and send us over your tech specs, send us over your experience as a whole, and we can help you out throughout the process.
I will say we're probably one of the first companies to ship like plug and play local language models across Mac OS, Linux, and Windows in the world. I don't know how many people are doing that, but pretty heavy duty stuff here. And Caleb, sorry we totally ambushed your demo on that part, but yeah, we're all very excited about this. So
yeah, I mean, I'm just as happy, just being here and hearing everybody talk about this stuff. It's almost uncanny the amount of things that you can do without a Wi-Fi connection. It's really unique.
I'll say this: we've been, and the team knows that I've been like super OCD about this stuff. But for the past like 3 years, Brian, Mark, the rest of the team, the entire ML team, we have developed extreme capabilities around model distillation, fine tuning, retrieval augmented generation, all of that. Because if you think about it, 4 or 5 years ago, when Apple started to release their integrated chips and integrated memory, you start to see it with NPUs with Intel. There's going to be this natural meet in the middle process, which we're in the middle of right now and deeply benefiting from, around big models in the cloud and local models on device. And so I think you're going to see us continue to build really amazing blended capabilities. And of course, if you want to go all local, that's really important for privacy, security, and just trust, right? So pretty proud of the work we've done.
Absolutely. It's definitely an exciting thing to be a part of. And I'm sure everybody on the Pieces team can agree with me on that one. But yeah, so just continuing the demo, we can see we have, relevant notes, some buttons leading you directly to where it was able to gather that information from. And once again, we also have the, suggested follow-up questions. So, I can go ahead and click on one of these, ask another question, and it's going to go out to the local LLM that I have installed on my machine, which is Llama 2. And yeah, it's really just incredible. It's a very, very nice experience, and I'm pleased to have built it. But yeah, that's going to go ahead and end off the Obsidian demo as far as I'm aware, and we can probably go on to the next thing.
Yeah, we do have some pre-submitted questions that I'd love to cover in the last 5 minutes that we have left. One of the questions, Brian, maybe you could help answer this, is do the LLMs support multi-language?
Sure. I assume they're referring to spoken language, but I'll also talk about programming languages just in case. So as for spoken language, as far as I know, Llama 2 specifically was trained only on English data. And also a big portion of training large language models is called reinforcement learning with human feedback. That's where real human evaluators evaluate the output of the model, and that's how they fine tune it. They are evaluating that based on English output. So the model will almost always output English language. Now, the language, it might understand if you input questions in another language, because other languages might have snuck into the training data set on accident. So there's a good chance it understands some other language, but it will always respond to you in English. And so as for programming languages, I don't know the exact list that Meta used to train this. All I know is that they trained it on a huge open source code data set, likely GitHub and many other sources. And so it will support almost all common, it will support all common programming languages. And then you saw in our demo today, Dart is far off from one of the most common programming languages, and it's able to write completely syntactically correct Dart. That's because the model is good, but also because Sav alluded to with retrieval augmented generation, the Llama is good generally at programming. It's like if a seasoned developer just picked up a new language, that you understand the syntax, you see a few examples, you know how code works generally, and it picks it up pretty quickly. So, but that being said, we would love to see if you guys could try to break this and find a language that it doesn't know, because we haven't found one yet internally, and we use a pretty wide breadth of languages internally here. So please hit our support channels if that's the case.
Yeah, and join the Discord too. We're always open to feedback. We want to hear from our users on a daily basis, so we know we're building the right things.
Yeah, I'll touch on two things real quick. Number one is around our Pro and a Pro Plus Cloud, and then also Teams plans that are coming out. We have literally all of them. We have the entire release roadmap. Those are all in development, if not ready to go already. And I would say the only nuance around monetization is that we are currently going through our Series A, and so or approaching it / going through it. And so there are some nuances around, hey, look, when do you turn monetization on? How do you do your reporting? How do you look at, if you turn that on in the middle of your Series A, let's just say it could be chaos, right? So I get advice from some advisors and some investors to say, hey, just hang tight till after. And others that are like, hey, yeah, just turn it on or whatever it is. But we're working through that at the business level, if you will. And then enterprise pilots are paid, and they are out there right now. So we're pretty excited about those. But we love the support. We make sure that our early adopters are going to be really well taken care of. And yeah, if you want to support in more than one way beyond economically, feel free to reach out to us. We'll do it.
Yeah. That's great. Well, one question that I'd love to hit on before we go is what upcoming features and improvements for the Copilot are you most excited about?
I'd love to take this one. If I take a stab at it first. A couple little things that I'm really excited for in the upcoming future is persistent chats. I know we don't have it yet, but we're scoping it, and it'll come very soon. As well as some, just additional models in general. I'll let Brian speak to some of the new local ones, but some of the cloud ones, such as like Cody, like Palm 2, all those we're looking to get in really quickly. All the infrastructure is down, so now all we got to do is just add the support for the individual models and layer it right into the pipeline.
It's about a day and a half to add a new model. So, your Cloud AI or Claude AI, however you say it, I think it's a French word. And then, obviously the Open AI stuff, the Google stuff, Project Gemini is coming out. We're working with the Google team over there to see early access on that. But yeah, both cloud and local is just really, really trucking along at full speed.
Yeah, just to continue on Mark's there with new models. So just a good example of that, how generically we've built this, or flexibly we've built this platform. When Code Llama was released, we were able to get it working in a production, a staging debug build within, less than a week, if not, 3-4 days, which is pretty incredible. The reason we don't have that released yet is strictly because we didn't find the output as consistent as Llama 2. It's not because we technically couldn't do it. And so I'm excited for that, just the flexibility of that pipeline. So once we do have a nice kind of model vetting pipeline built out, we're going to allow users to download just about whatever model you want. Once we figure out how to not make that kind of mess up other flows within the app, because we internally use some of these large language models to power some other features behind the scenes. So there are considerations there, but even farther than that, I think what I'm most excited about is larger models. So I saw that Trav, you said you have a 6800. We can absolutely get you the 13 billion llama at almost no cost in development time for us, and that'll significantly increase the performance of the model on your machine. You'll see some great results there, and for anyone that runs on an ARM Mac, especially an M2. We can serve you bigger models, and you'll see some serious performance. So I'm excited to see those come in.
Yeah, Brian, you had mentioned that you regularly use the 70 or 90 billion Llama 2 model on your MacBook. So
that's right. Yeah, I got the 70 in. It does sound like it's like a jet engine taking off, but it runs and it's nice.
Nice. Yeah, more on upcoming features. Y'all want to hit on a couple real quick?
Absolutely.
Yeah, Caleb, did you wanna say some features that you're excited about?
Yeah, I mean, I think you guys really hit the ball on the persistent Copilot chats, as well as the new models. I suppose if I had another one, it has to be definitely somewhere around the related people problem that we're really trying to solve. Is we're really trying to just figure out some way to basically, you're interacting with the Copilot, and let's say if you're in a big enterprise sense, maybe there's 200 engineers on your team, and it might be kind of difficult to find exactly who you should be asking what question. But really, the Copilot pretty soon, if I had to guess, is going to be able to, as a user, you could simply just enter your query like, hey, who should I ask about this? And it's going to be able to immediately tell, like, okay, this user is asking for a person now, and it's going to be able to very smartly figure out who on your team, has written code that's similar to the code that you're asking about, and it's going to be able to send you directly to that one person, or maybe even more than one person. It could even be a whole team. But yeah, that's definitely one feature that is very, very exciting, very unique, and could be extremely useful to either people who are newer to a company or people who are just a part of a larger company, and might have a hard time figuring out who to talk to about certain issues.
Yeah, or who's solved that problem before. You get an error trace or something like that, drop it into Pieces. It could be a screenshot as well if you wanted. We have all of our OCR models and stuff like that. And you say, hey, is there anyone that can help me with this? Have they solved it, et cetera. And to kind of build on that, I will say we're doing a lot of stuff right now around enterprise. And that's basically super smart retrieval augmented generation from things that are shared between your teammates, right? So, we have a nice Teams integration, and you could say at Pieces question, does Brian or Caleb have anything relevant to, this snippet or the screenshot or things like that? So yeah, we do have a Microsoft Teams integration. Definitely check that out. And we're looking at some of the others right now. But yeah, I think throwing people into the mix, throwing your timeline into the mix, being able to ask who and when is really nice for us.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's workspaces. The more you use Pieces, the more things you have saved, the more organized you want to be. And so having these custom folders for specific projects that you're working on, being able to share those with other people on your team. I mean, I'm an avid user of Google Drive, so that makes me excited.
Yeah, Workspace is going to be really nice, and Workspaces actually has a nice performance implication because it scopes, some of the context and the retrieval augmented generation. So as you're scaling past like 600, 700, 1,000 things, 1,000 things, it'll feel like you're still at 20, 30, 50. So it'll be real nice from that perspective.
Yeah. Well, I know we're a little over time, so if we weren't able to answer your questions, please hop into our Discord. We'll be happy to answer any support tickets or just hang out and talk, answer questions. It is at discord.gg/getpieces. So everyone's excited about the upcoming features. So are we. We're working hard to make it happen. And we really, really appreciate everyone taking the time to join us today. It means the world to us that the community is behind us, and it helps us, build faster and more passionately. So really happy to have everyone behind us.
And shout out to the entire Pieces team. Obviously everyone, so many hands in the pot here. There's so much that has to go right for this stuff to ship on time and, be high quality, and very excited about what's coming up. So very proud of everyone involved.
All right. Well, that being said, try out the new features. Let us know what you think. See how it can benefit your workflow, and we'll be in touch till the next one.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. See you, everyone.